All right, hello everyone. It is exactly 3:30 or 3:31 here, so without further ado, we'll go ahead and end today's webinar. So again, welcome everyone and good afternoon, and thank you for joining us for today's webinar, Lead with Character, Activate Your Own Rescue. This webinar is brought to you by our colleagues at Supporting Heroes in Mental Health Foundational Training, also known as SHIFT, and the Innocent Justice Foundation. My name is William Moore, and I am with the Office of Juvenile Justice and Delinquency Prevention's National Training and Technical Assistance Center, also known as NTTAC. And as your technical host, I would like to take a couple of minutes to discuss a few features of Adobe Connect webinar platform and provide a few announcements to keep in mind. Please note that this event is being recorded and will be published on NTTAC's YouTube channel. The webinar recording will be archived on NTTAC's YouTube channel, where you can also view past webinars. For the event transcript and supporting materials, please contact the OJJDP NTTAC Help Desk. For those wishing to download a copy of the PowerPoint slides and other important documents, you may do so by locating the handouts pod directly above the chat area. Here, you will also find an FAQ for webinar participants that will likely address any technical related questions. Click on the name of the file and then click the download button. During today's webinar, presenters will address questions during our Q&A segment. Please type your questions into the chat box as they arrive. For those of you participating in today's webinar as a group, please take a minute to help us count. Go to the chat window and type in the total number of additional people in the room with you today. If you are viewing alone, there is no need to type anything into the chat pod at this time. And again, I'll repeat, please type in the total number of additional people in the room with you today. If you're viewing alone, there is no need to type anything into the chat pod at this time. Only the total number of additional people. Following today's webinar, attendees will be sent a certificate of attendance. This certificate is sent approximately 1 hour following the conclusion of the event and is sent via an Adobe Connect thank you email. Please keep an eye out on your email for your certificate. Please note that only participants that are registered and signed in will receive a certificate of attendance. At the conclusion of today's webinar, you will be provided with a link to a brief evaluation about today's presentation. The feedback provided is used to assist in future planning and training. Today's presenters include Carol Brusca and Elizabeth Toe. Their bios can be found in the handouts pod. I will now turn the webinar over to our presenters for today's presentation. Thank you.
Good afternoon, everybody. This is Elizabeth Tao. I am the Program Manager for the SHIFT program under the Innocent Justice Foundation. On behalf of the Innocent Justice Foundation, I'd like to welcome everyone to our webinar today. We have a great presenter, Carol, that's going to be leading us through today's material, and then I will join y'all in the chat box and also facilitate questions at the end. And with that, I'm going to go ahead and turn it over to Carol.
Good afternoon. Hi, this is Carol Brusca. I am the embedded MHP for the New Mexico ICAT here in Albuquerque, and I'm really excited to be here today to talk to you about character strengths and how you can use those to benefit yourself in whatever area of your life you would like to. So the objectives for today are, as I'm going to do a brief introduction of what positive psychology is. I'm going to explain the virtues and character strengths that are a big part of positive psychology. I'm going to talk about individual character strengths that we all have, and I'm going to help you learn how to understand what your strengths are and what your character strengths and signature strengths are, and then how you can use your signature strengths to increase your resilience and to increase your happiness as a consequence. So let's get started. So positive psychology is a form of psychology that was started by Marty Seligman, and this quote here kind of expresses what he talks about. The good life is using your signature strengths every day to produce authentic happiness and abundant gratification. Typically, when we think of psychology, of the psychological field, we think of looking at it in terms of deficits or illness or what isn't working in our life. Positive psychology tries to flip that and consider what is working and how we can increase those things that are working to strengthen our well-being and to decrease the negative things that are going on in our life. So positive psychology and character strengths, the focus is on what strengths and virtues help us to increase our well-being. So what are those things that we have that help us to feel better? What are those things that we have that make us feel like we're doing well? So some of the words that they use, flourishing, and flourishing is like finding fulfillment in our lives, accomplishing meaningful and worthwhile tasks, connecting with others. When we're in a place of flourishing, that's what it's like. When we're in a place of thriving, it feels like things are going well. So it feels like we get up in the morning and we're excited about the day, and it feels just like when you think of a garden that's thriving, that's doing well, that's how we as individuals are when we're in a state of thriving. And then when you consider the word flow, that's when you're what other people might call in the zone. So when it feels like you get so wrapped up in what you're doing that you don't even realize how much time's gone by, or maybe you're doing something that you enjoy, and then all of a sudden then you realize that it's been 5 hours that have passed by, or somebody came into the room and left and you didn't even realize that anyone had been into the room. When you're in that place of flow, things just seem to be clicking and you're so wrapped up in it that your whole focus is on that activity and nothing else. So there's a values and action inventory that measures our strengths, and that's called the VIA survey. You can, in our handout, there's a link to the VIA inventory, and it's something that is really useful for you to take, because then you can see what your signature strengths are and then figure out how you can use those in your own life. So the assessment came about with Marty Seligman and some of his cohorts that decided they wanted to find out what universally character strengths we all had. So he and his students looked at books, looked at different religious materials, looked at stories that were historically written for children, things that are all across the literature field that would talk about what was universally decided to be things that were considered strengths. So maybe if it was something that was only considered a strength in the United States, it wasn't included, but they went across the board and looked at what came out in the literature and the reading material as universal strengths, and that's how they created the inventory of strengths. And then from that, they created a survey that would test for those strengths, and like I said, that's something that's available to anyone that would like to go on the website and take this survey and see what your own strengths are. So it helps us define what top strengths we have, where we seem to excel, and then also those strengths that might not be as strong. And if we have strengths that aren't necessarily as strong, it doesn't mean necessarily that that's a bad thing. It just means that might be an area where in our life where we want to increase that strength or kind of practice that strength. If you think of strengths in a sense of muscle, so it's the muscle that we have really strong muscles, and then the other muscles aren't so strong. So maybe it's something that we want to increase the strength of that character trait just so that we can have all of those accessible. So maybe if you're a runner, your leg muscles are really strong, but your upper body's not so strong. In that same way, you can have character strengths that are not as strong as other character strengths. So the VIA survey also helps to highlight the strengths that we want to increase. So these are considered naturally occurring patterns of thought, feelings, and behavior. And when we're going through this slideshow or when you do the strength assessment yourself, you might realize there's things that you lean towards when things are rough. So it could be that maybe if you are a very spiritual person and that's one of your character strengths, that when times get difficult, you have a tendency to seek out religious answers, or maybe you pray when there's a problem. Someone else might have a different strength that would lead them to do some research to find the answer to the problem. But it's the things that we do on a regular basis to adapt to situations in our life, or to when we come across a problem or a question in our life, that it's the go-to that we use to work our way through that problem. So the reason that it's important to understand what our character strengths are, it's because it can help us buffer against stress and trauma. So if we know that one of what our strengths are, then we can have those as our go-to in times of need. It can increase our sense of well-being. Like it says here, the strengths of hope, zest, love, and gratitude were shown to be positively associated with life satisfaction. So if when you're doing the survey, you find that one of your strengths might be hope or love and gratitude, that can be a benefit to you when you're looking at satisfaction in life. If you find that those aren't your strengths, then you can also find ways to increase those as a strength, and then as a consequence, then you could increase your level of life satisfaction. So you can develop your character strengths that might not be your strongest ones. You can develop those through vigilance and effort. And if you're aware that you need to increase your sense of hope in your life, then you begin to practice that by seeing what activities you can do that gives you that sense of hope. For instance, maybe if gratitude is not one of the strengths and you would like it to become a strength, you can do some gratitude activities, like every day you can find 3 good things that have happened and recognize how we can be grateful for everyday things. So by using that practice, you can increase your gratitude and strengthen that gratitude strength. So each of the strengths is broken up into different categories. And if you pull out the handout that hopefully you were able to print off, you can see that there's different strengths in a circular pattern. All of those strengths are what we're going to be talking about now, and they're broken down into different categories. So in the category of wisdom and knowledge, that would fall the cognitive strengths that entail the acquisition and use of knowledge. So maybe you have a strength of creativity or curiosity or open-mindedness, love of learning, and perspective. All of these things, the strengths of wisdom and knowledge, would certainly be helpful if you were in a situation where you needed to solve a problem and you weren't really sure how. So it could be that you realize that you have a meeting scheduled and you have children to drop off at daycare, and you have an appointment with someone at the same time. You can use your strength of creativity, using originality and ingenuity, to figure out how you can solve that problem. So maybe it's a matter of, by being creative about that, you can call into your meeting while you're dropping your kids off at school, or maybe it's a matter of open-mindedness and figuring, looking at critical thinking about, well, what is the priority here and who might be able to step in. So with each activity or each difficulty or each situation in life that we need to figure out a solution to, we can use our strengths to come up with a suggestion or come up with an answer. So the second strength that we're going to talk about is the strength of courage. And courage that involves the exercise of will to accomplish a goal in the face of opposition, and that's both external and internal. And there's all been time, I'm sure all of us have experienced times when we need to use the strength of courage. And if it's not something, again, that's a go-to for us, that we feel like we don't have much courage, then what do we do to increase that? So this courage includes valor, perseverance and industriousness, authenticity and honesty, and zest and enthusiasm and vigor. So although we don't necessarily think of courage as, we wouldn't automatically think of zest and enthusiasm as being courage. It really can be considered that. So if you can have a challenge, maybe you're going to be speaking in public for the first time, and you might think that that takes a lot of courage, but I don't have courage. But if you have enthusiasm, if you feel strongly about the topic, if you feel like it's important that you get that message across, that would be considered courage. The next strength we're going to talk about is the strength of humanity, and that would be considered love, kindness, and social intelligence. So social intelligence is a little bit different than like the regular intelligence that we think of, like an IQ test intelligence. Social intelligence is being able to emotionally recognize what's going on with other people and how what we say and do impacts them, and what we can do to encourage their own strengths, their own benefits, what we can do for them. Obviously, kindness, we know what that is. It's generosity, and love is valuing those. So the strength of humanity is something that we can use when there's an obstacle that comes up. For instance, maybe our neighbor is driving us crazy because their leaves are blowing in our yard every time we rake our leaves in our yard, for instance. Well, we can consider try using the value of love, or using the value of emotional intelligence to work through that. So maybe our neighbor's leaves are blowing in our yard every time we clean up our yard, but maybe it's because they're older and don't have the ability to rake their own leaves, or maybe they're too busy, tied up with work and kids and something else that doesn't allow them to do that. So having a little bit of understanding of them, so having some compassion for others, that's the strength of humanity. The next strength that we're going to talk about is the strength of justice, and that means the civic strength. So that's citizenship, fairness, and leadership. When we use the strength of justice, we consider what might potentially be our social responsibility and loyalty and teamwork. So this could be a strength that we use oftentimes at work when we're in a situation where there's a big task that has to be managed, and maybe you see that one of your coworkers is really struggling. Use the strength of justice and citizenship to really work with that individual in a teamwork manner. And it's about fairness as well. So you can use the strength of justice with, for instance, if you have children, and maybe it's a matter of how do you negotiate what is fair for everyone involved, and how do you take a leadership role in your community to express what's important to the community and what you can do to increase your citizenship and your social responsibility. The next strength that we're going to talk about is transcendence. So transcendence is the strength of to forge connections. So it's about appreciation of beauty and excellence. It's gratitude, hope, humor, and spirituality. And, you know, when I did the VIA survey the first time, the appreciation of beauty and excellence was, for me, way down at the bottom of the list, and I was kind of surprised about that, because I think of myself as someone who really is interested in things that are beautiful, and I can look at a sunset and I can think that how wonderful that is, or I can go out in my garden and just really appreciate the beautiful colors of my flowers. But when I did the survey, it didn't really come up as something that was a strength. And so I thought, well, if that's something, you know, that I really want to consider, and I want to increase that, how do I go about doing that? So how do I really focus on being mindful and really appreciating every moment of beauty? Maybe it's not just appreciating beauty when it's right in my face, but appreciating the little things. So it's appreciating when I see a young individual help an older individual across the street, or appreciating the kindness and beauty that I see when something in nature happens that seems to be awestruck. So it's a matter of what can you do to recognize those strengths, and then see if you can build on the ones that aren't so strong. So a sense of hope and optimism is always something that we can increase. if you find that hope is not one of one of the character strengths, then how do we increase our optimism? How do we take a look at an event and turn it around so that we can see that there's maybe a better, that things aren't as bad as we thought they were. Maybe if we're looking at things through a negative lens, all we see is pessimism. And one of the things that I work with individuals a lot on is changing their sense of pessimism to optimism. And I remind them, if we looked around the room and I said, look for all the red things in the room, and today, all day long, look for the red things. That's where you would look. And you wouldn't see the green and the blue and the yellow. All you would see would be the red. So if we think of that in terms of looking for the negative and not recognizing or seeing the positive because we're spending so much time focused on the negative, what do we do to change that so then we too can recognize that there are some wonderful things and reasons to be optimistic and hopeful? If we look for the negative, it seems to appear even more likely than if we don't. And spirituality, that's something that is very, very important to many people. And it doesn't necessarily just mean religion. It means how you gain your spiritual strength. So how is it you base your foundation of life? Do you have a spiritual path you follow? Do you have a religion you follow? What is it that you feel guides your moral, ethical behaviors? And how do you make those decisions? Is it based in a religious view? Is it based in a faith-based view? What is your spirituality, and how can you use that when things are tough? And the next one we're going to talk about is temperance. That's not a word that we often use anymore, but it encompasses the strengths to protect against excess. So it's being temperate, meaning that we don't go to one extreme or the other, that we kind of go down the middle. So forgiveness and mercy, humility and modesty, and prudence, and self-regulation and self-control. I think that was another one that wasn't one of my very top strengths, and so again, I was sort of surprised, but not so much, because when I like something, I really, really like it. So for me, working on self-regulation and being able to self-control and self-regulation, that was a strength that I really wanted to increase. And so the way that I did that is really be mindful of what I did on a daily basis, and if I was doing something to more of an excess, how could I moderate that and slow that down? So it's, again, if humility and modesty is your strength, or your strength is the ability to forgive and have mercy, then how can you use that in your everyday life? So you want to recognize your strengths, and this slide right here, if you can actually take a look at these and think, what brings positive energy into your life? So when you go throughout your day, what is it that makes your heart sing? What is it that makes you want to continue, that makes you smile? What is it that just gets you going in the morning? That's what's going to bring that's the positive energy. And what are 3 things that you're passionate about? So for me, I'm always passionate about wellness and about helping people find tools and techniques to make themselves feel better. So what are 3 things that you might be passionate about? And by looking at these questions and being able to answer them, that can give you the opportunity to kind of set the tone for what your strengths might be. So when are you self-disciplined? So are you self-disciplined when it comes to giving to others, but then maybe when you lack self-discipline when you're giving to yourself, or it could be vice versa. Maybe it's when you're working with your children, or you're giving to your children. You don't have that discipline to kind of pull back, and you have a tendency to spoil them. So when are the times when you are self-disciplined? When is it you're able to say, I'm going to do this much and not more than that, or I'm going to allow myself such and such but not more than that? So if I sit at a table with some chocolate ice cream, if I have some self-discipline, I can eat half the bowl. If I have none, then I'm going to eat the whole bowl. So it's, when do you have self-discipline? And when are you creative? When do you feel like you can just shine, that things seem that you just want to increase whatever you're doing because it feels so good? For me, that's being creative is what I do in the kitchen. So when I want to cook something, I can throw different spices together that might not you might not normally think of as going together, or maybe I'm creative when I am trying to figure out a solution to a problem, but I am not the least bit creative when it comes to doing art. It's not a strength of mine. It's not something that I have the ability to. But creativity is not just with respect to art and things. Creativity is whatever it is that you can do that brings you that passion and that joy, where you're using your creative side, your right side of your brain to do something that brings you joy. So maybe your creativity is coming up with plans for a new house, or maybe your creativity lies in coming up with a solution to a problem at work that nobody else can. So when are you feeling creative? Is that at home, at work, all of the above? And then where do you feel at peace? So when you think about that question, think about a time in your life when it seemed like all was right with the world. And the more you can create that feeling again and again, the more that feeling becomes a part of who you are, and it becomes a go-to for when you're feeling stressed. So for instance, when I think of a time when that's a sense of peace for me, I honestly think of a time when I'm sitting in my kitchen and I'm just listening to some music and I'm maybe stirring a pot of something, and it's just a really peaceful, relaxing time. For someone else, it might be when they're working outside in the yard. Someone else, it might be when they're sitting quietly with a loved one. So think about, where do you feel at peace? And when do you feel most calm and productive? I think that for me, the calm and productive part is early in the morning before anybody's up, and I feel like I can get things done, and then I'm just on it, and it feels like I can get more done in that hour than I can get done in the whole rest of the day. So where do you feel both calm and productive? And when do you feel like you're doing what you're supposed to be in life? So is there a time when you think, I feel like I'm on track. I feel like this is my mission, this is my purpose. What activities make you feel completely absorbed? And that goes along with feeling like you're in the groove, like you're in the flow. When are you so totally absorbed that no matter what else goes on around you, you're not paying attention to that? And then when do you lose track of time? Again, that goes with the idea of being in the moment and being so wrapped up in that activity that you don't even realize what else is going on. What activities can you not wait to do again and again? So is there something that when you're maybe at work and you're thinking, oh boy, I can't wait to, and whatever that might be, fill in the blank. And then when do you experience the feeling of being in the zone? So when is it that life is good and that you want to just be there to do that again and again, and it feels like everything is going right? When is it that you're feeling like smooth highways, like you could go on and do this forever and ever? So you need, part of recognizing and using your signature strengths is recognizing that there are things called opposing patterns. So when we have a problem that comes up, what do we sometimes do? We recognize that there's the adversity. So there's the initial problem or issue. And then at that point, it goes next down to our beliefs around that problem. So if I don't have a sense of ability to solve that problem, then I'm not going to be able to solve that problem. But if I can use my signature strengths to come up with a solution, then that's going to help me. So we need to recognize that every time we have a concern, that we have an issue, there are going to be things that are going to oppose our ability to solve that problem, because it's patterns that we've been in, that we've gotten caught up in for years and years. So there's the adversity, so the initial problem, and then it's our beliefs around that thought. So if maybe the problem is, I'm going to be speaking in public for the first time, and my belief is that oh, I can't do that, everybody will know that I don't know what I'm talking about, or I'm not smart enough, or why would anybody want to hear me? If that was my belief system around it, then my usual consequence for that belief would be to say, well, then I can't do it. I'm not going to be able to speak because I don't have anything good to say. People will know that I don't know what I'm talking about, and it's not going to work out, and I'm going to be embarrassed. So we need to dispute that thought by saying, what can I do to dispute that old thinking pattern? So I can say, well, the topic that I'm presenting on is a topic that I know really well. The audience is a small group of people that trust me and have asked me to come speak, so obviously they have some belief in me. So maybe I am smarter than I thought I am, and maybe I am an expert in this field, and maybe I can contribute something. So maybe my old belief pattern is no longer true. And then I become energized about it, and I think, wow, okay, if all these other people believe in what I'm saying, if these people are interested in what I want to say, they're interested in hearing me, they have faith in me and belief in me, well, maybe I can get energized about this, and maybe I can really succeed. So that's the process of recognizing our opposing patterns, and it's something that is a great thing to do on a regular basis when we realize that there's obstacles that are coming about that we want to conquer. So using your signature strengths, based on your self-concept of your signature strengths, not on external things. So if we recognize that our external strengths are being loving and having humility and being creative, then that's how we should base our self-concept. We should consider ourselves a loving, creative individual, not somebody who doesn't have the ability to speak in public, for instance. You want to embrace the tools that you already have. So if one of my tools is creativity, I really need to use that and think every time a problem comes up, how do I use my creativity to solve that problem instead of getting stuck in the old rut of I can't, I'm not good enough, it won't succeed. And then use them in all different scenarios. So maybe today I need to use my creativity when it comes to getting my kids to soccer practice, or maybe tomorrow I need to use my creativity when it comes to how do I negotiate 2 meetings that are supposed to be happening right back to back, or how do I work with my coworkers or my supervisor who I'm struggling with. So you can use the skills you have in every different environment and arena of your life. And then use them daily. So practice using them. If it's a strength that we have and we haven't been using it when we come across difficulties, start doing that now, because that will make us fast track to a solution. And then develop new strengths. So being open to looking at what the bottom 3 or 4 strengths that you have and seeing how can I incorporate those into my daily life to see if I can use that then to solve problems in a way that I didn't in the past. So with the strength of humility, for instance, how you can use it at work. So maybe you and a coworker have completed a project and your coworker does not often get the kudos. Encourage them to have the limelight. So that's using your strength of humility in a way with your coworkers. So, and it's a simple gesture to do, but it strengthens that humility strength that you already have. So you can do it, at work. You can give the kudos to your coworker. Maybe you can recognize that in your spouse or your children. Maybe you realize that every day they do something that's very helpful to you and you don't acknowledge that. Well, start by acknowledging that. Strengthen that humility. Strengthen that ability to recognize and appreciate other people and the things that they do and the important value that they have in your life. You can use the signature strength of courage of kindness in your life. You can do that like this says, if your partner's having a hard time, think of ways to support them through kindness. You can support someone at the grocery store through kindness by, if you see someone who's struggling with their groceries, do an act of kindness and help them carry their groceries to the car. Or an act of kindness might be when you witness someone doing something nice for somebody, you say, wow, that's really great that you did that. Or if you see someone that's that is doing something very nice, like maybe a parent is doing a really good job with their child who's acting out and having a temper tantrum, and saying to them, I recognize how difficult that is, and you are doing a fabulous job. Just hearing those kind of things can be so beneficial when difficult times happen, because that feeds us as the individual getting that positive feedback, and it feeds us as the individual giving that feedback, because the more we can do to be gracious and have gratitude for others and express kindness, all of increasing those positive strengths is going to increase our well-being. Nothing feels better than to be able to give somebody something positive and get a smile back. So if you wanted to increase your signature strength of citizenship, you could do it with your kids. So you could help them become involved in an activity that relates to strengthening your community. So maybe you want to show your children what citizenship is like, and you can go work at a food bank. And this teaches them that the importance of being a part of a community, and how being a part of a community is so important, because in all actuality, we are not an island. We need to have other individuals. It really does take a village for all of us to succeed. So being able to teach that skill to your children, or maybe it's something that you want to strengthen in yourself, so you find a cause that's important to you, and you champion that cause, and you work with the group that's, maybe it's a global warming group, and you want to do your part, then how can you support that group and show your citizenship by doing that? Maybe it's a goal that you would like to increase your positivity or your perseverance. How do you go about doing that? Well, like there's one instance here, you could do it in sports and hobbies. You can train for a marathon, so it teaches you to persevere. Another thing you might do is if you're trying to break a habit that you have that's been a long-standing habit, how do you persevere through that, and how do you tell yourself, every day I'm not doing this, whatever it might be. Every day I'm not drinking that soda that I'm trying to break that soda habit. I am strengthening my skill of perseverance. And how can I continue to persevere and use that skill? And the more you do it, the stronger it gets, and the more easily accessible it will be when you need to use that skill in a different setting. Or you can use the sense of curiosity. So this can be, this one talks about using it with your friends, but again, this could be something that you could ask of. You could be curious about anything. You could be curious about what your child did at school today. You could be curious about something that goes on in your neighborhood that you would like to know more about. So maybe there's, you would like to teach someone something at your next neighborhood meeting. Then be curious about what would be beneficial to your neighborhood, and then do the research and find out, and then share that sense of curiosity and the knowledge that you gain from that with others. A strength of hope. Well, you can use it like it says here in education and learning, by being optimistic. We can use hope in every day, and I think it's necessary every day. Given the circumstances of the world, it seems like hope is something that we can always strengthen. So by trying to see the positive of things, by trying to be optimistic, by looking at the things that we have and recognizing that there are many that are less fortunate than us, recognizing that if each day we try our hardest, there is hope that things can get better. So just recognizing that and using it in our everyday life. So you can support your self-care by using these strengths and skills, and figuring out what are the things that I need to do to support my self-care. Do I need to support my self-care by really using humility as a strength? Do I need to really take a look at my gratitude? And would I feel happier if I was able to recognize how thankful and how lucky I am to be in the situation I am? Would it be beneficial to me to stretch my courage muscle? Should I try something that I've never tried before, just so I can increase that strength and that sense of courage, and then know that I am better than I believed? Can I practice some disputing old belief systems so that I can really feel better about who I am? All of these are going to help with our self-care, because as we feel happier in our life, as we feel like we're in the flow, as we feel stronger about who we are and our mission in life and the things that we're doing, that's going to help increase our self-care and make us feel better. And when we have the skills in place to see an obstacle and work our way through that, then that's going to help us just increase the quality of our life. So when we know that we have what it takes to get through the problems in our everyday life and we can be successful, maybe that's successful with support, maybe that's successful by using creativity, maybe that's successful by using our friends and neighbors and family, but knowing that we can be successful, knowing that we do have a reason and a purpose, and using that to increase our quality of life, that's going to help us in all situations. So if you have, these are the references that I've used for the presentation. I think that Elizabeth might have been collecting some questions if we have any. If you do have some questions right now, please that let us know now, and we can answer those questions now. I haven't had a chance to check the chat, so if there's any questions, please post them now in the chat, and I'll be happy to answer what I can. Thank you so much for listening.
Thanks so much, Carol. That was awesome. I know that I'm a little bit biased and think that she did a great job, but let's see. We do have some questions. So the first one that came in was, how do you build these strengths in children leaving homes where domestic violence occurred?
Okay, so part of that is, I'm assuming if they're children leaving domestic violence situations, then maybe you would be working with them in a case manager therapy, some sort of situation where you're working directly with these children. If that was the case, then I would say if you're a clinician or if you're someone working with them, you might already be able to see the strengths that the child has. So maybe one of the strengths that the child has is the strength of perseverance. So they were able to continue to do what they, continue in a domestic violence situation to get themselves to school every day, or to make sure they bathed every day, or whatever it is that you see that they were able to do. Recognize that strength and then encourage them to build on that strength, and then teach them how they can use that that skill, that strength that they have already throughout their life. So maybe they perseverance, just for instance, that's what comes off the top of my head. But if they were able to persevere and survive the situation that they were in a domestic violence situation, talk about how that takes some courage, that takes some perseverance, that takes some ability of hope that things are going to get better. And then, for instance, maybe if they're having problems at school with someone, a friend at school, how can they use that skill? So taking the skills that they already have, that you see as a strength, and then generalizing that to other ways they can use that. So if I have perseverance as my skill, as my strength, how can I use that at school when I'm having a problem with a friend? I can continue to try to talk with them. I can continue to try to be their friend. That's just off the top of my head, but I mean, I think that it's certainly something that can be done, but it's a matter of you as the person working with that child, recognizing the skills and strengths they already have, and then highlighting how they can use those throughout other areas of their life. Does that answer the question?
I will let it be at that unless we hear something that comes back in as a secondary, but that will probably be down the road here in just a second. Another question that came in was, does SHIFT provide any sort of peer training for first responders? So I'll probably answer that one. We don't have a specific peer training curriculum that we do. We have a lot of people that we know that are geniuses in that specific field, and I'm happy to connect anybody that wants that information. I think my email might be on here, but if not, it's elizabeth@innocentjustice.org, and I'll put that in the chat so everybody has it, and I'm happy to visit with anybody that has those questions specific to peer training. Okay, another question, it says, this is a wonderful assessment that would be helpful when supporting people with physical disabilities, because the evaluation does not focus on what one can see but what is not obvious through mental and emotional aptitude, intangibles that come from inward. Would this help parents, friends, managers identify other skills and qualities?
Certainly, and honestly, the link that I gave you, it's a survey that is free to anyone, and I think on that link to the webpage there might be one that's for children and adolescents, but if not, I think there is one that they've used for children and adolescents. So if someone is interested in that, they can email me and I can see if I can access that. But this is a great thing to do at work, because if you recognize that you're part of a team and one person has the skill of perseverance and one person has the skill of creativity and one person has the skill, has another set of skill of courage, you can figure out who has what skill and how those are all so integral to being a good team, and how you can highlight those skills when a problem comes across the team. So it can make for a much more effective team in the work environment.
Great. What happens with one recognizing passions or things that people desire, maybe deemed destructive desires that are bad, may bring them joy but others pain, or be inappropriate? Sorry, I have to scroll down. Being self-absorbed, dominant in nature, and not recognizing the other's contribution.
So if I'm understanding correctly, so maybe maybe you're lacking in the skill of self-discipline, but you've got some strengths in some other areas, and that's if you're using one of your strengths. I'm not really clear what the question is, but if you're using one of your strengths and it's to the detriment of others, so maybe if you're using, I don't know what that skill might be that you could be using that would be a detriment to others, but maybe if you're going overboard, anytime we go overboard on anything, whether it's, maybe one of the things we like to do is give money to others who are in need. Well, if we give all of our money away, then that's definitely not going to be a good thing. Whatever we're doing, there's certainly an extreme that we can go to that would make it into a negative behavior. So I think, honestly, it's all about the balance and trying to keep everything in check. And if someone is doing something to an extreme, whatever that behavior might be, it's a matter of trying to, if they're willing, to consider how that the consequence of that for other people in their lives, and how to try to help them recognize that although this is a wonderful quality that you have, what you're doing is then causing detriment. So for instance, again, like I said, if your kindness is causing you issues because you're letting people stay in your house that are taking advantage of you, or it's impacting your family members in a negative way, it's having that conversation with that individual to say, you have a wonderful skill of kindness, strength of kindness. How can we use that so it works for you and for those in your life? Because right now it's not working for those in your life.
Great, and I think that answered that. Again, if these aren't what you're looking for in the questions, please let us know and we'll kind of follow up on it. So I have kind of a two-part question here. And the first part is, so the intent is for us to base our self-concept on the result of one particular strengths quiz.
So this is one tool that you can use. So it's not that this is not the end-all be-all for every question, every problem that comes up in your life. This is one set of skills and tools that you can use. It's certainly not, it's not the only answer. This will give you some insight into something that you might not already know. So maybe you already are really in tune with what your strengths are and you use those on a regular basis. And so go with that. This is just for individuals who are looking for ways to try to increase what they're doing in a positive way, what they're doing that's working in their life, to get them to a place where they feel like they have a purpose, to feel like things are going well, to feel like their life is going a direction they want it to go. This is one of the tools that you can use to get there. So if this doesn't work for you, certainly I would suggest that you don't even bother to do the survey if you don't feel like it would work. But this is just one tool in a whole slew of things that you can use to help understand who you are and get a concept of yourself that's based in the positive side of things as opposed to the negative side of things. So positive psychology, like I said before, is based on what are the positive things about us, as opposed to thinking about the negative things that we can bring up. That, you know, I have a tendency to have anxiety, and so that can be looked at as a negative thing. So instead of thinking in terms of that, what are the strengths that you have in spite of the anxiety, and let's try to focus on those.
Awesome, thank you. I did respond that I bet your answer would be no, that this is not the one, you know, one size fits all, and you definitely backed me up on that, so great. The second part to that is this person would be interested in a larger discussion of how to identify and work with strengths without relying on a specific philosophy or tool, which may or may not accurately identify strengths and abilities. Do you have any information about that?
Okay, so my thought on that would be is to just try the survey to see what you think, and then just because, you know, it could be, you could say, oh, that's hogwash and it doesn't apply to me at all, or it could be something that you find does have some sense of meaning for you. But like I said previously, and if you have the opportunity to go back and look at the previous questions, it's when is it a time when you feel at peace? What are you doing when you feel like your life is in a good place and things are just flowing and things are right? And this, you don't have to do the survey in order to do that. That's just something that you can do an internal questionnaire of yourself and say, you know, on the best day of my life, what did that look like? And why did it feel like it was the best day of my life? And what was I doing in that moment that made it feel that way? So that won't be based on any kind of philosophy or any kind of theory. That would be based on you looking at your own life and thinking about those days that you could, you know, make a list of the days in your life where you felt like you were on top of the world, and what was happening at that time, and what were you feeling at that time, and what activities were you doing, who were you with, and seeing if there's a theme to that, and if so, how can you use that to recreate it again?
Okay, perfect. I'm going to answer a question really quick. How do we access the strengths test? If you guys look up in your handouts block, it should be above maybe your chat window. You can download the PowerPoint. You can download the character strengths document, and within that document is actually the VIA survey and also a list and definition of all the character strengths. So go ahead and go up there into the handouts and download those files at any time. A lot of this addresses communication with others. What if you're an introvert? And we have about maybe 3 to 4 minutes left, Carol. We have a couple more questions.
Okay, so if you are an introvert, just like I said for the previous questionnaire, you could certainly, the questioner, you could certainly do the questionnaire to see what your strengths are, and then see if I'm an introvert but I want to increase my citizenship, for instance, what can I do from my home? Can I make phone calls supporting my candidate? Can I write a blog from my home computer about a cause that's important to me? So if I want to strengthen my kindness and I'm an introvert, how can I maybe, if I can write a card that says great job and leave it anonymously on my coworker's door. So it's a matter of doing what feels comfortable to you when you know what your strengths are. So you can be creative without having to be an extrovert. So you can think of all sorts of ways from a creative aspect on how you can solve a problem, and then if you don't feel like, if you're part of a team at work and you want to use your creativity because you've got this creative idea, then present it to your boss, and don't present it to the team, just present it to your boss and have your boss present it. So certainly if you are an introvert, you can certainly use and strengthen the existing strengths.
Okay, and a couple more, and this has a little bit more content, but I'm just going to ask the question at the end. Is there an age range in the VIA survey is normed on that you know about?
I do not know that off of the top of my head. The way the VIA survey is working is that it is open to the public now, and they are continuing to gather more and more and more data. And so millions of people have used the survey now, and it's across all countries. It's across age groups. Like I said, I'm not sure if it's just 18 and above now. That I don't have the answer for. But I know they're constantly trying to increase the integrity of the survey and learn from what the responses they get, so they can make sure that it is really as good as they think it is.
Okay, and I have two more quick questions, Carol. We're running out of time. I really enjoy all the questions and everybody staying on to hear them. So one of the questions, and I will kind of answer it, do you provide any sort of training resources for youth with mental illness issues? Specifically, the SHIFT program is for criminal justice professionals of all levels that work with victims and within law enforcement. So we really focus on the professional who's helping all the individuals, or the professional doing the cases or prosecuting the cases. And so that's our focus. I don't have any specific lists for a training resource for youth with mental illness, but maybe Carol does.
So I would recommend, actually May is National Mental Health Awareness Month, but I would recommend you go to the National Alliance on Mental Illness, that's NAMI website. They have all sorts of resources, and typically most every city has a NAMI group, and it's about supporting families with individuals with mental illness.
Perfect, thanks. And one more quick question. Do you need to know your strengths before you can identify the young people you are working with their strengths?
Well, I think that it would be nice if you could have your own strengths, but I think that if you had that, it would help you use your strengths to encourage theirs. But I think that that it's not mandatory, but I think that it would be beneficial.
Okay, perfect. We're going to conclude the questions with that. Everybody hopefully saw my email address in the chat window. Please get in touch with us with any further questions. I can always, if I get something from you guys, I can copy Carol on it and make sure she comes in on the conversation. We will have this webinar available on our website, which is theshiftwellness.org, and also it will be available on NTTAC's page. So that will be coming up in about a week. One more thing to tell you really quick. Oh, there's our emails. Sorry, I missed that slide. So Carol's email is in there. My email is in there. Let us know if you have any questions. Also has our website. And just wanted to let everybody know, we are actually going to have this new series coming up. So one in each month for June, July, and August. And the next one is going to be on June 18th, and it's How Was Your Day? A Loaded Question. So we're really going to be talking about wellness in families, especially when you have to deal with, a stressful job, and then how do you handle that with your family. So that's our next one coming up. You can also see upcoming webinars on our website, theshiftwellness.net, and they will be listed there. We really hope to see everybody else. And with that, I'm going to go ahead and turn it back over to William.
Fantastic. Thank you very much. I appreciate you, Elizabeth. And Carol, thank you so much for such great content being presented today for our audience. Just a few last-minute announcements for everyone, a few last-minute reminders. You may contact NTTAC through the website displayed on this slide. You can stay up to date on the latest information by signing up for NTTAC's TTA listserv. Also, don't forget to check us out on Facebook at OJJDP TA. You can also contact OJJDP via the Help Desk by following the contact information on this slide. Do you have a training and technical assistance need? If so, please submit a request via OJJDP's TTA 360 platform through the link displayed on this slide. As a reminder, the webinar will be recorded and archived on our YouTube channel, where you can also view past webinars. For the event transcript and supporting materials, please contact the OJJDP TTA Help Desk. Please take a moment to review this disclaimer. And Lastly, we would appreciate if you could take about 5 minutes to complete the feedback evaluation. Again, thank you all for joining us today. Have a great afternoon.